First off, I need to correct a number of things I said last week. Neville, would you read Genesis 6, 1 to 4?
Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man for ever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown.
Okay. Numbers 13:33 says, and there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which came from of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. And so we were to their, in their sight. Now, I want to correct what I said last week. The great problem is, it has been a teaching in the church for some time, that if we quote Job chapter 1 and verse 6 as a reference to the sons of God, which is correct, Job chapter 1 and verse 6, the sons of God came before God
to present themselves,
and Satan joined with him, or with them. But we should also take into account John 1:12.
But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name.
The great problem is, my King James says, he gave he power to become the sons of God. Therefore, the sons of God cannot be taken as fallen angels. Thus it must mean that they were of the line of Cain. We can only assume then that the daughters of men refer to normal relations. Second, Jesus explicitly said, Matthew 22:13, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are of the angels of God in heaven, which is also repeated in Luke 20:34 to 36, for those who are taking notes.
32 to 36.
Yeah, 34 to 36.
Okay.
Therefore, in Jesus' own words, angels are asexual and do not procreate. We have shown that the text does not refer to illicit relationships and that the fathers could not be angels. Notice in Genesis 6 and verse 4 that it says there were giants, fact number 1, and afterwards the sons of God came into, fact number 2. There is no connection between the fact that they were giants and the fact that people had children. Obviously. Genesis 6:4 does not say that the children that they were produced were the mighty men of old, men of renown. Mighty men is a term which is used 154 times in the Old Testament and simply refers to powerful men, either physically or politically. It is the same today. There are mighty men, and some are men of God, and others are worldly and unsaved. So there were mighty men in those days, of which Noah was one. Men of old also holds no mystique. These were simply the heroes of bygone days. Men of renown is also used in Numbers 16:2, please, Sheila.
Numbers 16:2. And they rose before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown.
Okay. And that's the rebellion of Korah, if you remember rightly. Ezekiel 23:23 says the Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the Assyrians with them, all of them desirable young men, captains and rulers, great lords and commanders, all of them riding upon horses. These are famous men or well-known men. The Hebrew term literally means men with a name, meaning they had made a name for themselves. The descendants of these relationships were not monsters or mutants or anything extraordinary. Some were ordinary people, some were powerful, some were little known, and others had a name, made a name for themselves. Genesis 6:5, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. It goes on to describe these people as wicked and worthy of God's judgment. In other words, chapter 6, the first 4 verses which Neville read, and this verse 5 goes on to describe these people as wicked and worthy of God's judgment. Furthermore, the translation of the word Nephilim or Nephilim, Genesis 6:4, as giants is very arbitrary. I've looked it up, and there are many other possible ways this word could be translated here. Bullies, mighty ones, tyrants, etc. Once again, it is dangerous to build a doctrine on a word which we cannot translate or explain with any measure of certainty.
That's right.
Genesis 6:4 must be taken, therefore, as a simple description of life before the flood, and not a commentary on mysterious genetic mutant life forms. In fact, Jesus obviously has this verse in mind when he says, Matthew 24:37-39, It's die, isn't it? Matthew 24, 37 to 39.
But as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will be the coming of the Son of Man be.
One of the principles of hermeneutics is that the verse has to be read in context.
Yes.
In fact, context is what our dean used to say. The context is clear that life was going on as usual. People were becoming more and more self-absorbed and sinful, but judgment was coming. This is the same point Jesus was making in Matthew 24. People will be self-absorbed and fixated on everyday life and will not be ready for his coming. God's judgment fell simply because of the wickedness of man. This had absolutely nothing to do with demons, angels, or mutants. Look at these verses again. Genesis 6, 5 to 7, please. Genesis 6, 5 to 7.
And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them.
The point of the scripture is that the flood came because of the sin of man. Every imagination, in verse 5, every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The sin of man is why the earth is going to be destroyed again. Not by flooding, but by fire. We have quoted this verse before, but it's good to read it again. In Numbers 13:33, I quoted it before, there we saw giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. When you think of it, this is after the flood. And all people who populated the earth had to be born of Noah. Thus the sons of Anak, or the Anakim, must have come from Noah's genes. Let's go to 2 Peter 2, 4 and 5. 2 Peter 2, 4 and 5.
For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly.
Verse 4 is similar to Jude 1 verse 6. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. If we look at the context of Peter 2, 4 and 5, in 2 Peter 1 to 3 it says, there were and will be false teachers, and they will bring upon themselves swift destruction. In 2 Peter 2 verse 4, angels sinned and God reserved them for judgment. In 2 Peter 2 verse 5, the ancient world sinned and God judged them by the flood, but spared Noah. In 2 Peter 2, 6 to 8, Sodom and Gomorrah sinned, and God judged them, but spared Lot. In 2 Peter 2, verse 9, therefore, in the future, the Lord will judge the unjust and save the godly. The angels and the pre-flood world are simply 2 of 4 examples that Peter quotes to show that God will punish sin. The connections between the sinning angels and the flood are the same connection with false teachers and Sodom. The connections have nothing to do with gene mutation, but is all about sin and the consequences. Any questions? Does that clear that up?
Definitely clears it up. Yeah.
Okay. I was very concerned, having taught the original, that I should then correct it at some time. So let's go on. Genesis 7:12 to 7:16. Please, Neville. 7:12 to 7:16.
And the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, entered the ark. They and every beast after its kind, all cattle after their kind, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, every bird of every sort. And they went into the ark to Noah, 2 by 2, of all flesh in which is the breath of life. So those that entered, male and female, of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in.
Okay. Who closed them in the ark?
The Lord.
It says the Lord. Verse 16.
It's very interesting that they contrary to popular opinion, the Lord shut them in. How long was the rain on the earth?
The flood was 40 days.
40 days and 40 nights.
And 40 nights, okay.
Who went into the ark?
There's Noah and his
8 of them.
there's 8 of them.
Noah,
And his wife
his
and-
sons, and all their wives.
Why is that important?
Do you begin?
Well, that's
You're talking about the number, or that it was
the human race.
Why
Husbands
is
and
that
wives.
important?
Well, the human race started again from them.
Okay. So by the laws of first mention,
okay?
this is the first time you read of 8 people
Right,
who go in a boat.
right.
And so therefore, throughout Scripture, when you read 8, you know that it's a number of new beginnings.
New beginnings, yes.
And you read about boats, and they are a type of the church.
Yeah.
Because by Midrash, we can assume that the ark is a type of the church.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right. We saw last week the length and the breadth and the height of the ark all mean something. And that's by Midrash. So, 8 is the number of the new beginnings. Therefore, Jesus' gematria
Gematria.
is
Must be 8.
Is 8.
888.
888.
Okay.
Right.
And when did he rise from the dead?
On the 3rd day.
On the 8th day.
Oh, on the 8th day, that's right.
It was the
first day of
the first week
Oh, right.
was
Yes,
the
yes.
Passion Week,
Yes.
and then the day after the Sabbath was first fruits.
Yeah.
And so he rose on the 8th day.
Right.
It's interesting.
It is interesting, yes.
It's the Feast of First Fruits, which is the 8th day.
Right.
And what other thing can you tell me about the 8th day?
It's on page 8 of my Bible.
Don't be difficult.
something to do with feasts.
No. Very simple. Very simple. And it's only boys.
Oh, on
On
the
the
8th.
8th day,
day,
they're
the-
circumcised.
Circumcised on the 8th day. Okay. It's important. We understand this. This is all a number of new beginnings. And Paul says you can circumcise your heart instead of your flesh. Okay. Okay. Genesis 7:17 to 20. Please, Di.
Now the flood was on the earth 40 days. The waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters rebelled and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered.
Okay. Many liken the ark as a type of something. What is it? Or the rising of the ark on the waters as a type of something.
The church.
The ark is the church, we understand.
Well, the waters are the people or the world.
The people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The saved people. And therefore it's a type of the rapture.
Oh.
Many people
Okay.
suggest that the ark rising up on the waters is a type of the rapture,
Oh, right.
because everyone else is killed.
Sure, yeah.
Only those
None of them were
in the
saved.
ark were saved.
Sure.
When had they seen rain before?
And they had
Reference?
in Genesis,
Before
right?
what? Before the actual flood?
Flood,
Yeah.
And they haven't seen
Oh, right, yeah. Well, there's no mention of it, isn't it? Apart from God's founding of the earth.
Okay. Well done.
Well, there's no mention that I recollect.
Okay. So, what we need a reference.
Right.
How was everything watered?
Was it a mist? A dew?
mist.
Genesis 2, verse 6. Genesis 2, verse 6.
Thank you. A mist.
But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground.
Okay. That's it. And we understand that rain hadn't been seen before.
No.
So to turn around and say it's going to rain, very difficult.
I must have thought he was mad.
Well,
Now,
yes, interesting.
one thing I want to mention is the waters covered the land to a depth of
How many cubits was it now?
15 cubits,
That's what I thought it said.
which is 22.5 feet.
Okay.
But we can't assume that the land was the same
As it is today.
as it is today,
No.
because
It must have been perfect.
things would have changed.
Sure.
With the deeps giving up their water and so on and so forth, and the earth heaving. Okay.
Plus there's parts of the earth, the world, that is rising in height.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yes. Yeah. Quite. Genesis 7:21 to 24. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life. Of all that was in the dry land died, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both men and cattle, and the creeping things and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, that they were with him in the ark, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Okay. Who died?
All the flesh died that moved on the earth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All flesh died.
Yes.
And everything that was in the was the breath of life in their nostrils. Yeah?
Yeah.
So who remained alive?
Only Noah and those who were with him.
And everything in the ark.
And everything in the ark.
Yeah? How long did the flood persist on the earth?
150 days.
Okay. Genesis 8:1 to 4, please, Sheila.
And God remembered Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of the heaven were stopped, and the rain from the heaven was restrained. Excuse me. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of 150 days the waters were abated. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat.
Okay. Why mention that God made a wind to pass over the earth? We know that everything is there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's moving the water off the earth, or
It's
no.
Promotion of evaporation. Yeah?
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. And then
Okay.
I was trying to think of something more spiritual.
Yes, I was thinking of the Holy Spirit. Yes.
Straight. You know,
That's all.
promote evaporation.
Well, that's
That's
what
it.
I was thinking of. Yeah.
How long did the flood take to go down?
Until the 10th month.
150 days. Yeah?
50 days, yes.
7 months.
Verse 3.
Oh.
And the waters returned off the earth
Yeah.
continually, and at the
Verse
end
3,
of the 150 days, the waters were abated.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah.
When did the ark rest on the mountains of Ararat?
On the 7th month, the 17th day of the month.
What is
Very
significant about that date?
Something to do with the feast again, is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think which one.
Exodus 12.
Tabernacle, is it?
Tabernacles, yeah.
Exodus 12,
What verse?
verse 1.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the 1st month of the year to you. That's verse 2.
All right. In other words, the 7th month shall become the 1st month. Yeah?
Okay. Or it's called Abib, is it? Abib?
Nisan.
Nisan.
Nisan, okay.
Doesn't matter. Okay. Now, what was peculiar about that month?
Isn't it when they were brought out of Egypt later on?
Yeah.
Mm.
What did they do before that they were brought out of Egypt?
Well,
Well,
they have
the
to eat
Passover.
a
was
bit of lamb.
They had to kill the lamb,
Kill
or
the
choose the
lamb.
lamb.
Choose the lamb.
Mm.
On what day did they choose the lamb?
10th of Nisan.
The 10th of Nisan.
Okay.
Okay. And they inspected it until the
14th.
14th of Nisan.
Mm.
Okay. And then on the 14th of Nisan, they killed the lamb,
At twilight.
and Jesus rose on
the 14th?
14th they killed the lamb, and Jesus rose on
Oh,
the...
rose, yeah, sorry, rose. On the 18th?
17th.
What was
The
it?
17th
Oh,
day.
it was the 8th day, wasn't it?
It was the 17th
17th.
of Nisan, which
Right.
is, and the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat.
Right,
Mm.
right.
My goodness me.
That beginning as well, I don't know if it's anything to do with Rosh Hashanah or whatever.
No.
Rosh.
That's
Okay.
7 months later, when we have the great problem is the Jews have two calendars.
Okay.
One is the civil calendar and one is the religious calendar.
No, just think that beginning. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's okay.
Fine.
That's beside the point.
Okay. So, Genesis 8:5 to 8:8. Please die. 8:5 to 8:8.
And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So it came to pass, at the end of 40 days, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. Then he sent out a raven, which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. He also sent out from himself a dove, to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand.
No, hold on. It's 5 to 8, that's 9.
Yeah.
Oh,
5 to 9.
Okay.
well, I'm still reading 9.
Still reading now.
So he put out his
sorry.
hand and took her and drew her into the ark to himself.
Okay. It's actually 5 to 8. Anyway, why did Noah send forth a raven and a dove?
Well, there was no place for it to rest. You know, like a tree or a mountain for it to rest.
Well, because a
There was no
raven,
place.
raven was an unclean bird,
Yes.
and he wanted to keep the dove.
The raven was an unclean bird. Why?
It would have eaten carrion, wouldn't it?
It fed on carrion.
Carrion, right.
And there would be an awful lot of carrion around.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
good point.
if the carrion was floating, the raven would return, because it had nowhere to put its foot. Okay, no dry land.
Right.
Okay.
So, because up until the waters dried up from off the earth.
That's
so
right.
Did he find a place to?
Right.
It looks like
First
doesn't it?
of all, Noah couldn't see out the window to ascertain what the waters were doing,
Didn't have a ladder.
because the window looked up.
Oh.
He couldn't see, sort of, oh well, okay, the waters have gone. Secondly, a raven is a bird that feeds on carrion, and therefore if the earth had been dry, the smell of the dead carcasses would have enticed it to go far off from the ark, which in fact it did.
Yeah.
If the earth was still covered with water, the raven would come back again.
Come back again, yeah.
Okay. Thirdly, the dove would return if it found no resting place.
So there's no rest for the sole of its foot.
Okay. Right, let's read verses 10 to 14.
Is that me?
Yes, please.
And he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. Already enough?
I suppose if Noah couldn't see out.
2 verses, 13 and 14, please.
And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dried.
Okay. So let's have a look. Now, I've obviously got this from a commentary, and I have 1 or 2 problems with it. The rain continued for 40 days. The waters prevailed for 150 days. The waters subside for 99 days, and Noah delays for 40 days. He sends the raven and the dove 20 days. After another month, 29 days. The interval between the 27th of the 2nd month is 57 days. Therefore, it's a total number of 365 days.
Well done, John. That's
Wow.
interesting.
I've never seen that before.
It's a year,
Yeah.
but a solar year,
I was going to say an English year.
not a lunar year.
No.
Okay?
There's not a lot no one could have done to know.
No. I
Well,
mean,
you could-
you know,
yeah.
it's just interest.
It's interesting and it's there for.
I mean,
It's there for a reason.
I would disagree. But the waters subsided for 150 days. But I understand that Noah delays for 40 days, so that's 139, and the sending the raven of the dove, and the dove is 20 days, and so on and so forth, you know. So, there we are. That's it. Any questions?